Our next question comes from EA Mario, who says, two questions. Can I get good at fighting if I only spar against weaker opponents? Yes, absolutely. Most of your sparring partners should be guys that you are better than if you want to get really good. Why is that? Before I tell you why, I want you to think of most martial arts schools. Jiu-jitsu schools are a great example of this because they're always doing live rolling, live drills. They're always practicing their art the same way they would in competition right there in the gym. And in most of these gyms, the instructor is often, not always, but often the best guy in the room. Sometimes he's not the most athletic, sometimes he's not the strongest, but it always seems like he has everybody's number. Why is that? I'll tell you why. Because he spends more time than anyone troubleshooting and problem solving against people who are not nearly as good at jiu-jitsu as he is. And that matters greatly. In stark contrast, a lot of new guys in almost every martial art that involves sparring, they get really frustrated because everybody's better than them. When they spar, when they roll, when they grapple, they get squashed, they get crushed, they get beaten up, and they don't like it. And then they don't learn very much from that other than this is what a beatdown feels like. This is what getting crushed feels like. This is what losing feels like. And that's not a very fun phase, but it's a necessary phase because you need that. It's inevitable for most humans to go through that, right? But you're going to gain some skills eventually, and once you have those skills, that base skill set of movement and so on, some newer guys, some less experienced guys are going to come in, and the coach is going to teach you a technique that day. Let's say he teaches you an armbar from your guard. And you're thinking, okay, let's put this to practice. And then you go against a guy who's much stronger than you, bigger than you, better at jiu-jitsu than you. And you try to armbar him from the guard, and whoop, he slips out and passes your guard. And you think, well, I gotta grapple with these guys who are better than me if I want to get better. And you keep grappling with them, and you keep getting squished and crushed, and you just keep losing over and over again. And then nothing changes, nothing happens, no learning takes place other than I can't beat the tougher guys. But try this, try something very counterintuitive. Go to those less tough guys, go to those brand new guys, go to those wimpier, weaker guys. And then try out that technique, try out that armbar from your guard. And what happens? You're going to have a lot easier time getting it. And you're going to learn a lot of interesting things along the way about what works and what doesn't, about how your perception of how the technique works in your mind, according to your memory of how the coach taught it, stacks up against reality. Perception and reality are radically different things. Any instructor of any field of knowledge knows this. If you teach somebody a movement of the hands, put your hand here, then put your hand here, right? Let's make a figure 4 wrist lock. I taught this technique the other day, and you know what a lot of the new students did? They did this. This is not the same as this. As far as figure 4 wrist locks goes, this is weak, this is strong. This doesn't work, this works. But from their perception, hey, I feel like I'm doing the exact same thing as this. No, it's a different thing. So your relative perception of the technique, you might feel like you're doing everything right, even though you're actually doing everything wrong. because sometimes the difference between right and wrong is the difference of a couple of centimeters. And when you roll with the weaker opponents, with the less experienced guys, you start to see that right away. You start to have opportunities to fix it right away. Whereas when you roll with the stronger guys, you just get squished. So those little guys are they're like little weights. If you want to get strong in weightlifting, do you pick up the giant ones right away? No, you can't. It's not physically possible. You have to get stronger first. So what do? You pick up the smaller ones first. And then you pick up some slightly bigger ones. You put more small weights on that bar until you got a big giant weight on that bar. But what's it made out of? It's made out of increments of plates that are smaller that make up big weights, ultimately. Okay. Even as, and especially as, an advanced practitioner of a martial art, you should totally do tons and tons of practice with the noobs, man. One of the smartest things I ever heard about training from the great Ricky Lundell is this: if you want your jiu-jitsu to improve, roll with everybody until the white belts can beat you. And this is his advice for black belts, for advanced jiu-jitsu practitioners. Roll with everybody until the white belts can beat you. In every sense of the words, in every meaning with which you can interpret that phrase, it's true. Whether you are rolling for 3 hours straight until you are too physically tired to beat the weakest, wimpiest little white belt on the mat, or whether you spend years and years training those white belts until they are good enough to beat you on the mat when you're fresh, or anything in between, that all holds true. The wimpy guys, the weak guys, the new guys, those are some of the biggest assets you will ever have to your training. Do not underestimate them. Do not be ungrateful for them. Next question.